Committee and was a founder member of Culver City Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Planning Committee. He also served as former Assembly Member Karen Bass's Environmental Cabinet. I welcome Gary Silbiger.
Thank you. I didn't know half those things you said about me, but thank you so much for mentioning them. Boy, we've heard some fantastic presentations today, haven't we? It's so informative and at the same time so scary. It gives us two options only. One is to be depressed and give up, and the other is to organize and get our solutions together. Which do we choose? What? I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I have just a few kind of broad ideas on where to go because we haven't had a chance time-wise to really talk much about solutions, but I think that'll be happening in the later follow-ups today. Before I start, I want to explain my view about oil. On its own, oil, as we know, is a dangerous pollutant which must be replaced by safe forms of energy in order to save our planet. Of course, fracking must be opposed in the strongest manner, but it should be part of a comprehensive plan of opposing the dangers inherent in oil itself. As I wondered what I could bring to this crucial discussion about fracking, I thought, based on my experience as an organizer and a council member, I might find, quote, 4 ways to beat the greedy oil corporations. Of course, there are much more than 4, but I have limited time. These 4 suggestions are listed in order of first working with elected officials, then local ballot measures, and finally the state. Number 1, building an organization in support of health and safety in oil operations. Taking a positive approach, we're supporting health, safety, and quality of life, is the most effective way to organize. Of course, there are already great groups in Culver City and elsewhere that are effectively doing great work around fracking, and we need to expand the focus and consolidate those groups for this winning campaign. Each segment of the city should have representation in this group, geographically, by neighborhood associations, seniors, youth, ethnicities, businesses, schools, and well beyond. The more sectors participating, the broader and quicker our word will travel. Everyone suffers when a city has toxicity in its air and water. People refuse to visit or live in a city that is dangerous, and no business wants to be part of a community that is simply an unhealthy place. Remember the Vietnam-era poster stating something like, "War is unhealthy for children and other living things"? Anybody remember? What about art that has a similar slogan in opposition to universal oil contamination? The organization I'm referring to needs leaders and maybe a written newsletter, whether online or in print, to inform the public of our solutions. Like all political campaigns, we must be ready to go door to door to popularize this issue. Number 2, educating our communities so that a positive resolution by the City Council is most likely. Elected officials listen closely when large number of constituents organize around an issue. I know that. We all do. "You can't fight City Hall" is a statement created and used by certain elected officials. In reality, City Hall is often challenged and the public is regularly victorious. And organizing is most effective when there is a timetable for presenting a solution to the City Council. I'll give one example. Shortly before the United States invasion of Iraq in 2003, many individuals organized with the goal of having the City Council of Culver City go on record opposing the invasion. People talked with their neighbors. The Culver High School staff worked with the students to sponsor a forum and later took a vote about the preemptive strike. When the anti-invasion item was agendized, the City Council chamber was packed, with the aisles filled to capacity, so we had to use an overflow room. As one speaker after another told their story, it was clear the overwhelming majority knew the federal government positions were lies. Many high school students spoke passionately at the council meeting, and the Culver City High School student body president presented the student vote of opposing the unwarranted invasion. After spending the whole evening listening to public comments on the illegal intervention, the City Council voted 3-2 in opposition to the invasion. This never would have taken place if the public had sat on their hands. So even though the invasion took place, the education of the public was incredibly meaningful, both in terms of learning about U.S. foreign policy and effective ways to present ideas to local officials. So once the educational work has been completed, the next step is to meet with each elected official. Organizers should take responsibility for communicating with a specific city official. Bring several people to the meeting and distribute literature to that elected official. Although the most effective public comment is in person at a televised council meeting, and by the way, make certain the agendized topic is close to the beginning of the meeting so that supporters will not have to go home before speaking. Individual emails and telephone calls to the elected official is a crucial part of the dialogue. And once the politician notices the mass number of communications, each of which should be individually written. Why do elected officials generally side with the oil companies? I think we know the reasons. The oil companies contribute greatly to the campaigns of politicians, although elected officials who have taken money or other favors from such a company should always recuse themselves from those votes. Be sure to obtain from your city the required financial contributions forms filed by each politician. They're available for free. Second reason the elected officials side with the oil companies is that the oil lobbyists spend enormous amounts of time and money trying to sway the politicians. Third, the fear of major lawsuits by city staffs is driven home to the elected officials. And fourth, especially in tough economic times, elected officials are afraid of being sued by big oil, including the cost of the lawsuits paid to the city's attorneys and experts, and of course, potential monetary settlement. I vividly remember some then recent elected council members refusing to revoke a massive approved Culver City development called the Intiative project because they were afraid of a potential lawsuit. This we have to fight. The number three, what can we do as a community, is placing a ballot measure in a city election. Another member for stopping corporate greed is to bring the ballot measure to our jurisdictions, our cities, counties, and states. A ballot initiative is one of the greatest examples of direct democracy. People working together to bring beneficial laws through the ballot box. Before I speak about the process for doing this, I'd like to briefly explain the history and theory behind a ballot initiative. I know it's been talked in many of our jurisdictions. In the early 1900s, as the railroads helped elect their favorite California statewide candidates, and corruption ruled our state, as it does today, reformers put on pressure for change. In 1910, Hiram Johnson was elected governor, along with other state legislative reformers in the progressive era. And on October 10, 1911, with the guidance of a group called the Direct Legislation League, 76% of the voters of California approved a constitutional amendment to permit ballot initiatives for elections at all levels of government, including local elections. In a humane society, the rights and protections of individuals and all living things will take precedence over other interests. Today, you may have received a proposed anti-fracking ballot measure here locally that's been also used around the country. Review it thoroughly and give us your input. Some additional sections of a ballot measure should include required information about prior fracking from the oil companies, including penalties for doing such illegal activities. It would include city inspections of oil wells. It would also include the institutionalization of an ongoing resident-based committee on oil. And finally, specific criminal and civil penalties for violations by individuals and corporations. Where do we further find the right for such a ballot measure? In fact, the 10th Amendment gives power to the states except for those areas which are either specifically or implicitly enumerated in our Constitution. Of course, through the centuries, the federal government has increased its powers, some of which it shares with the states. And today, local jurisdictions also share powers with our federal and state authorities. We do a lot of protection in our cities. We have fire departments and police departments. We have environmental protection.
5 minutes.
Medical services, and much more. Then we can go to our own California Constitution. Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution explains that, quote, all political power is inherent in the people. Government is instituted for their protection, security, and benefit, and they have the right to alter or reform it when the public good may require. And that's the end of the quote in our Constitution. And cities possess more power than we sometimes realize. For example, in a case involving Sprint's request for cellular telephone towers to be installed in the city of Palos Verdes estate, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit ruled in 2009 that the city could bar the towers for aesthetic reasons despite a federal statute. This case was utilized by us in Culver City at the same period of time in order to reject additional cell towers proposed on top of a store in a neighborhood across from an elementary school. And in a case involving eminent domain, the taking of private property, the U.S. Supreme Court found that it was proper for a city to take residential property under the Fifth Amendment because a future development would beautify the community and raise money for the city. So I'm not very happy with that decision, but I think it shows us that cities have tremendous powers when we decide that we want to have an aesthetically beautiful city, when we want to have our own development, and the state of California gives cities tremendous amount of power and authority to have our city look and feel the way we want it to be. Yet rarely do we have ballot initiatives proposed by the public on local ballots. In Culver City, in the past 10 years, for instance, only one ballot initiative was organized by residents. That was to limit developments near schools. At the same time, our city council approved 4 ballot measures, 3 regarding taxes, and 1 for its charter amendment. And our Culver City School District also proposed 2 ballot initiatives pertaining to increases in taxes. You would think that with all the issues that we have as a city and community, that we would want to make the changes that our elected officials either will not or do not want to do. And ballot initiatives are another good way of getting things done. So what's the process for placing an anti-fracking measure on our city's ballot, or any measure on our city's ballot? California Elections Code, all cities have a requirement for permitting a ballot measure with the elections ballot measure beginning with the filing of a notice of intent to circulate petition and then a written text of the measure with the elections official. The city attorney has 15 days to create a ballot title and summary, and the proponents have 180 days to collect signatures of 10% of the number of registered voters in our city as reported by the county elections office to the Secretary of State. It's a very doable thing, getting 10% of that number to sign a petition to do anything of value. And this is something that we should really consider closely. And finally, the 4th area of work that we could get involved in and should get involved in even more is a visit to Sacramento. You know, we've communicated our wishes with our state officials many times about anti-fracking. And it shows by the bills that we just heard about today, the 2 pending bills in the state legislature. Of course, I haven't had a chance to read them. I don't know if they're available to the public, but I'm sure that, like any bill, they will need a lot of improvements. Okay, so I just want to say that in terms of a Sacramento visit, It's time for us to start working with other people in California who are also facing oil corporations, abuses. Have a time in the future where we'll all get on a bus or in our cars, make our way to Sacramento, just like they did in Wisconsin, when Wisconsin wanted to take away the right to public employees. It's time for us to do that and to stay in Sacramento until we have a good solution to our situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.